A United States Marine unit was moved into the city expecting resistance. What they found instead was something far worse. Streets that looked empty would suddenly erupt in gunfire. Buildings that appeared abandoned were hiding deeply entrenched enemy positions. And within hours, the Marines would be pinned down, wounded men would lay exposed, and movement through the city would be almost impossible. Before the night was over, 12 Marines would give their lives. And for the men trapped on those streets, the hardest part was still ahead.
What's the hardest part of it? Not knowing where they are, that's the worst thing. Riding around and running the sewers and the gutters anywhere. Be anywhere. Just hope you can stay alive from day to day.
As heavy fighting raged across Hue City in South Vietnam, United States Marine units were ordered into areas where resistance was expected but not yet fully understood. Their mission was clear: move through contested streets, secure key positions, and continue pushing enemy forces out of the city. Conditions inside the city were already proving difficult to read, and Marines had little experience with urban combat. Streets that appeared quiet would quickly become dangerous, while enemy positions hidden inside buildings, walls, and damaged homes made it difficult to judge where the next attack might come from. With daylight fading, Marines were advancing carefully through the unfamiliar streets. As Marines pushed deeper, movement through the city became slower and increasingly cautious. Units moved slowly through narrow streets, house to house, kicking in doors and clearing buildings one room at a time. Automatic fire erupted from concealed positions without warning, snapping across streets as Marines scrambled for cover. Within moments, 2 men were hit. In the confusion, Marines dragged the wounded toward what little cover they could find while calls went out for a corpsman. The gunfire could erupt from almost anywhere, forcing the men into a slow, grinding battle. Marines were beginning to understand they were facing an enemy dug deep into the city. By late evening, Marines attempting to move between blocks increasingly found themselves pinned down by enemy fire. Crossing open intersections became death traps, forcing men to hug walls, move through the courtyards, or even break through buildings rather than risk the open roads. In some areas, squads had become separated as confusion inside the city grew. Small groups of Marines got cut off and were forced to fight their way back to the main group. Orders shouted from one side of the street could disappear beneath gunfire. With multiple units in trouble around the city, the radio traffic was chaotic and confusing, leading to more problems. More Marines were being wounded, and the men attempting to help those men were being wounded. The advance was stalled, and things were falling apart quickly. By midnight, the Marines were pinned down in place. Men who had been hit were dragged into doorways, behind walls, or deeper inside buildings where their wounds could be treated while gunfire continued outside. Some corpsmen moved from position to position under heavy fire, carrying bandages, morphine, and plasma, trying to reach men who could not move on their own. The priority was no longer advancing. It was keeping the injured Marines alive long enough to somehow get them out. Additional Marine units were ordered forward, including armored support, but reaching the trapped Marines wouldn't be easy. Visibility was poor and the advance was slow. Progress was coming one block at a time.
What kind of fighting is it going to be?
It's house to house and from room to room.
Kind of inch by inch?
That's exactly what it is.
By the early hours of the morning, tanks were bogged down and taking casualties. One man was killed and another wounded in the street beside him. As gunfire continued, 2 Marines moved forward to pull the wounded man back toward cover. Before they could reach safety, both men were hit and killed. After hours of fighting through damaged streets and repeated delays under fire, Marine reinforcements finally began reaching sections of way where trapped units had remained pinned through much of the night. Yet conditions inside the city were worse than many expected. Marines who had spent hours holding up inside shattered buildings and near exposed intersections were exhausted, low on supplies, and still dealing with wounded men who had proven difficult to move under fire. As reinforcement units linked up, attention quickly turned toward evacuating casualties and reorganizing positions before daylight brought another round of fighting. In several areas, wounded men were finally carried or assisted back through streets that only hours earlier had been nearly impossible to cross. But even with reinforcements arriving, the fighting was far from over. By dawn, Marines across Way would begin understanding the full cost of the night. As daylight returned to Way, the cost of the night was heavy. 12 Marines had been killed, while many more had been wounded. For the Marines who survived the night, daylight wouldn't bring relief. It only meant the fighting would begin again.
Hello. We here at Battle Docs would like to extend our thanks to the people who watch our videos. I think it's important that we remember these men and women who sacrificed so much for our country. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here. We'll see you on the next video.